College's program on invasive species, and also we'll hear from Mass Heritage on the mapping tool for vernal pools and for rare species. So on behalf of NUIPIC and all of us at Region 1, we hope you all enjoy the show, and please pass on the word about these webinars that will be held in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. So we'll go over the agenda here. We'll do welcome and introductions, about 10 minutes. We'll go to IMAP invasives. After that, we'll have a brief Q&A. Then we'll go to the vernal pools and rare species info system, followed by another brief Q&A, and then we'll open up the discussion. This is me, Kimberly Ross. I'm an environmental analyst and I manage the wetlands programs here at New England Interstate Water Pollution Control Commission, or NUIPIC. I will be your wetlands moderator. First, we'll hear from Nancy Olmstead. Nancy coordinates the IMAP invasive mapping program and database, trains partners and volunteers to use IMAP, performs field identification and assessment of invasive plant infestations, and makes recommendations for infestation management. And I will pass it on to Nancy.
Great, thanks, Kim. All right, take control, that's me. Okay, let's see if I can advance. So Kim, should I be able to advance at this point?
Try now.
Okay, let's see. All right, I'm clicking take control. And now I think I got it. Great. Thanks, Kim. So as Kim said, my name is Nancy Olmstead, and I am an invasive plant biologist here at the Maine Natural Areas Program. We are pleased to announce that we've adopted IMAP invasives as a new tool for invasive plant mapping and management in Maine, including in Maine wetlands. So as all of us on this call know, invasive plants are a threat to our wetlands and to our uplands. These invasive plants displace native plants, altering habitat structure. Some of these invasive plants do not provide suitable nesting or foraging resources for wildlife. And unfortunately, wetlands seem to be especially susceptible to monoculture forming invasive plants. So on the top right, we see Phragmites australis, common reed, invading a salt marsh in southern Maine. This picture was taken by my colleague Don Cameron. And that species in particular, unfortunately, does not provide suitable habitat for some of our salt marsh specialist bird species, such as the Nelson's sharp-tailed sparrow and salt marsh sharp-tailed sparrow, both of which are in decline. On the bottom right, we see yellow iris, Iris pseudochorus, forming a dense infestation around a small pond in southern Maine. So these are some of the species that we are concerned about. So when we thought about a mapping tool for invasive plants in Maine, we had several needs. We really needed a central statewide repository to be able to understand the distribution statewide. That would also help us to better advise our partners on prioritization, control, and prevention. We needed something that would allow multiple partners to collaborate on a site, everything from mapping to treatments to monitoring. So something that would continue for a long time. We wanted ArcGIS data compatibility without the Esri learning curve because many partners, such as citizen scientists or non-technical agency staff and small NGOs, simply do not have the capacity to support the ArcGIS Esri technology. We wanted a tool that allowed ways to share practitioner knowledge, for example, what controls work on particular species or at a particular site. And finally, we wanted a detailed site-level mapping tool to empower strategic management. So Rather than responding ad hoc to invasive plant infestations, understanding what you have, where, about how much, that can really make a big difference as you step back and look at a site from a management perspective. So on the right, I've just drawn a schematic of how we wanted to be able to represent things. IMAP Invasives met our needs with some key functions. It is an online mapping tool and database, and it is a partnership between several robust organizations. So we are confident that the tool will be supported over time and it will keep up with developments in technology. The user accounts are free and it's an easy platform to learn. It has a relatively intuitive interface, not overly complex. It has detailed query tools to help users find what they are looking for and sift through a large volume of data. It's Google Maps based, so it's got a familiar background. You can search on place names, topographic features, lakes, etc. Data are Esri compatible, so you can get your data out to work with in ArcGIS for cartography or analysis. It is smartphone ready, and you can also enter data at your desktop. There are several mobile apps in the works. So the folks at IMAP Invasives are working to take advantage of mobile technologies. And finally, it has customizable email alerts, which are great for early detection rapid response species or species of particular interest to a certain user. So a lot of functionality to be alerted when a particular species comes into your county or your watershed, for example. IMAP does all this with 5 data types. It starts with point data. So on the top left, we have observations, which show the location of a species. It's pretty simple: photos, who, what, where, when. You can add comments until the point is confirmed by the data administrator, and smartphone data entry can allow you to put points on the landscape. Then you get into polygon data formats. So the assessment format is a detailed information about an observation. So you see in the second picture there, there's a green polygon shape drawn, which encompasses the red point. And that polygon holds a lot of information: area infested, percent cover of the plant within the polygon, many other data fields. The third data type is a survey. And in a survey, you can note that you searched for the presence or absence of specific invasive species. So it's nice in that it records negative data as well as positive hits. When you get to the treatment phase, IMAP will note your control effort details. You can delineate your treatment area. So in that bottom picture, the green assessment polygon that we saw in the second picture has had a blue treatment polygon inserted into a part of it. So we see that only a portion of that assessed area was treated. And finally, the fifth data type is the infestation management record, which ties everything together, allows you to track your efforts and the status of high priority infestations over time. IMAP does that with tiered user levels. So the 5 data types that I showed on the last slide are available with increasing user level. So the general public at the lower left, without a login, does see data, but what the general public sees is a map which aggregates data by county or watershed. So for a certain species, they can see how many total point records are noted in the different counties, for example. A level 1 user doesn't enter data, but they can view points on the map. Once you get up into the higher user levels, levels 2 through 7, you begin to be able to enter data, whether that's the observation or point data or the polygon data. So this functionality is great because it allows you to tailor the user's account to what the user is going to be doing. A citizen science who just wants to note locations of invasive plants on public lands and parks only really needs a level 2 user account most of the time, whereas a land manager who is doing everything from soup to nuts can get a level 7 user account, which allows them access to all the different areas of functionality. So this is what the home page looks like for a level 7 user. So IMAP has 4 major panes in the home page, starting at the left with the Enter Data frame, then View the Map, View Data in a Table, Query, and Reports. You also have buttons across the top there for My IMAP Invasives, which is this home page, Resources, Data Management, and System Management. So on the Resources tab, you get access to pre-made data sheets. Those are can be customized to your state. So we have some Maine-specific data sheets just that we've tweaked for how we have been using the tool. But there are also national data sheets available there. And you can see that there's a lot of out-of-the-box functionality. So certainly at the level 7 user, we are doing training sessions and offering those to folks in different parts of the state so that folks could get up to speed on what's available here. All right. So in IMAP, there are 3 ways to take location data. The first, as I mentioned, was the smartphone. So you can run IMAP through the browser as long as you have connectivity. So you can make a point using your smartphone right through the browser, and then you can write down additional information later to enter at a computer. It's a very simple process to take a point. It's who, what, where, when, and photos. And with smartphones, you can just take the photo and upload it as you make the point. If there was additional information that you wanted to record in a comments field along with the point, you could store that in your field notebook or write that on a data sheet or even on a piece of paper, scrap of paper. The second way would be to write down the GPS coordinates if you're carrying a GPS in the field and enter the data later at your desktop computer. I'm showing a data sheet, simple data sheet in the middle there. And the third way for users who might not have access to a GPS or a smartphone would be to go ahead and print out a paper Google map, mark your location on that paper Google map, and key it to a notebook or data sheet and enter the data later back at your computer. That's a little bit more challenging in very forested areas, but certainly in open wetlands, that's not too difficult to locate yourself. So there's flexibility there to accommodate users who have different preferences in terms of how they work in the field and also have different levels of technological tools, ability to access tools at different levels. So I'm going to go through a couple of case studies here of how some land managers in Maine are using the IMAP Invasive tool. And I'll say that we just adopted IMAP last spring, so these have all happened over the last 9 months or so. It's very exciting. The first case study here is the Kennebec Highlands. This is a large state of Maine public land holding. It's about 6,500 acres. It includes an exemplary unpatterned fen ecosystem around 2 ponds on the eastern side. So I'm not sure if y'all can see my pointer, but there are 2 small ponds here on the sort of central east portion of the pond, highlands rather. And those are exemplary, as I said. This area is managed for recreation and occasional timber harvests. We did the initial mapping, the Maine Natural Areas Program staff, that is, did initial mapping this past summer. That was followed by treatment by some state staff from the Public Lands Unit that manages this area. And the monitoring and follow-up treatments, we were hoping that a local conservation NGO will be doing those. So on this map, you see in the background a darker green area, which is the Kennebec Highlands Conservation Land. You see green dots with white numbers in them, and those represent occurrences of observed invasive plant species. And then you see the brighter green shapes, and those represent treatment polygons. So you'll see that in the center there's a long linear one where we treated some stuff along a road, and the top one is a dispersed treatment area. So obviously not all that area was treated, it's just that those points within that area were treated. And at the bottom you'll see a smaller, another smaller treatment polygon. Case study 2, Hollowell Town Forest. So this is a small town-owned parcel. It's managed for recreation. It's a former reservoir. It's about 200 acres, and it's not showing up as a conserved piece of land. Our database didn't have it, so we're adding that. The initial mapping was done by NNAP staff, and our management ideas were provided to the Conservation Commission, which is active in this town. Treatment was carried out by some high school students with Conservation Commission volunteers supervising, and the treatments were entered by the Conservation Commission. So that was a great opportunity for someone else to take the baton and run with this after MNAP staff had been on the ground. And we're hoping that monitoring and follow-up will continue by the Conservation Commission. So you're seeing the green points that were mapped by MNAP staff and the green polygons which were drawn and populated by our Conservation Commission partners. Case study 3, Harpswell Invasive Plant Partnership. This is a new group. It's a collaboration between the Land Trust, the Conservation Commission, Town Council, and others, just interested citizens. It's an all-volunteer effort. So this is in the works for 2015, and we've been helping them to plan. They've officially selected IMAP as their mapping tool. So in 2015, step 1 will be to train the volunteers in IMAP and in Plant ID. Step 2, surveys along major roads and key public access lands. Step 3 in their plan is to use their survey results to educate town residents and strategize where management has the most potential. Step 4 will be to recruit and train work parties to go out and tackle those areas that have the best are the highest priority and where action can be effective. So these folks are trying to think strategically across their whole town, and they are excited to use IMAP as part of that effort. And case study 4, this is a broad one, Land Trust Stewards. Land Trust stewards do invasive plant mapping and management on Land Trust-owned properties. These stewards often have limited data management capacity, so for example, to create a really good GIS database in-house. And many are using IMAP as an off-the-shelf tool for multiple staff, for example, to create consistent standards for data and record keeping across a statewide organization. Maine has a high density of land trusts. We have about 100. And many of those have stewardship staff or volunteers who are eager to do something about invasive plants and need some good tools to get them started. So we're excited that IMAP can be a tool for them. So that is my presentation. I thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact me if you have more questions about IMAP.
All right, did anybody have any questions? If you had any questions, please put them in your the chat box. Okay. We can move to Sarah Haggerty. Sarah Haggerty is the Chief of Information and Program Development for the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program at the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. All right.
Thank you. Taking control. Okay. So how did we advance?
Sarah, I found it at the bottom left. There was a sort of a hidden...
Ah, there it is. Thank you. So I'm Sarah Haggerty with the Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, and I'm going to talk about our online vernal pool and rare species information system. I'm going to give a quick overview of our program and show you how this project links into our program's goals. So we're a heritage program. Every state in the country has a heritage program. Every province in Canada has one. We also happen to be a state agency as part of the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. Our program was created in 1978. We joined the state in 83, and our mandate is to ensure the conservation and protection of biodiversity in the state, which is a pretty formidable task. So we accomplish this through education, research, land protection, habitat management, and regulation. But since this is a very broad task, we really focus our efforts on the state-listed species under our State Endangered Species Act, as well as vernal pools and priority natural communities. So as you can imagine, this effort to conserve the biodiversity of the entire state demands a robust database and a large amount of data. And those data are what that data need is what brought us to building VPRS. We work with a good database that currently houses over 40,000 spatially explicit data points. So this is the locations of rare species, of vernal pools, bat hibernacula, natural communities. These records have come in over the last 30 years from a wide variety of sources. They come from our staff. They come from researchers at universities, cooperators. We work closely with Mass Audubon, New England Wildflower Society, landowners, consultants. So we have a wide variety of sources. And up until we created the VPRS program, all of this came in on paper. So in 2010, we applied for the EPA Wetlands Grant in order to develop an online reporting system. The goal was to make it easier for the users to submit data to us and also more efficient for our program staff to process the data and to share the data and work with it internally. We also maintain a certain amount of public data that we put out there. Certified vernal pools we put out publicly. In Massachusetts, there's a certain amount of regulatory oversight that can come to vernal pools if they're certified. So we maintain a data layer that's posted on MassGIS that prior to VPRS was updated sort of annually. We also maintain lists of state-listed species at the town level that, once again, prior to this system, we'd updated on a yearly basis. And these are tools that a lot of conservation groups and regulators use in their conservation efforts. So we wanted to be able to update that in real time instead of annually. We also were able to get some additional funds from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation to build a mobile app to go with the system in order to be able to collect data while in the field. So the system itself is very much like other online systems. You create a user profile, it's password protected, and there's a one-time signature page that backs up your electronic signature. You can submit information to us without us receiving this form, but we can't process them until we have them because we actually use the data in regulation. The system itself is basically 4 forms. The first 3, the vernal pool certification form, rare plant observation form, and rare animal observation form, are basically electronic versions of existing paper forms. The survey form is something new that we created with the system to try to capture, similarly to IMAP, survey effort, to try to capture some negative data, survey effort, et cetera. So I'm not going to talk more about that today, but just know that it exists. So again, the first 3 forms are electronic versions of existing forms with added benefits. So if you do a paper form, the paper form is just the basic data collection. You then have to find a map and photocopy it and put your observation on it and attach it and get your photographs together and pull them all together. With the VPRS system, you do all of your mapping inside the system. You can map with a point, a line, or a polygon. If you have a GPS location with a lat long, you can type that in. It'll put it on the map. You can change the base maps depending on what you're comfortable with or what shows the location the best, whether it's topos or aerials. And all of the required fields have an asterisk to denote which ones are required. We put the required fields in there so that there are a lot of questions that we ask, but not everyone wants to fill them all in. So we wanted to be able to give the user the minimum amount of information that they need to give us, and we also set up the system so that you can't submit without filling in all those required fields. And that saved a huge amount of back and forth because we would receive a lot of data that didn't have a photograph, didn't have a signature, didn't have a town, and we spent a lot of time trying to follow up. This way, we can't even get it until the required fields are filled in. So there's a mapping component, and then there's also the tabular component, all of the questions, essentially. And they're the same as on the paper form, and with they're broken out into tabs. as the groups of questions are appropriate. So we have a habitat tab and we have population tab. And every tab has a little question mark at the top, so that if you're looking at the question and you don't quite understand what the question is asking, you can click on that and there's help documents to explain what all the questions are on that tab and what we're looking for. You can also print any report that you've started and saved at any point, even after you've submitted it to us. Once you've submitted, you can't edit anything in the system. It's just like the paper form. Once you drop it in the mailbox, you can't edit it anymore. But you still have access as the user, and you can still print a copy. The print report contains all of the information included in the questions, as well as a map and thumbnails of your attachments. That's the other sort of cool piece to this. You can upload your photographs into the system. You can upload any other attachments. Some people, plant people, like to do hand-drawn sketches. You can scan those and upload them. For vernal pool certification, one of the methodologies is to provide recordings of chorusing frogs. You can attach those audio files, and they all show up in one tab. So those are the features within the individual reports. A couple of the other things that we added to the system include the ability to copy a report. And this is really useful if you go back to the same place year after year, if you're monitoring a plant population. You don't have to put in all the same information every single time, the directions, the habitat description, put it on a map. You just copy last year's and update the appropriate information, change the dates, put in new attachments, save, and submit. It's also helpful if you have a number of individuals, a number of different species in one place. So on coastal plain pond shores, you might have 5 different plant species all in one place. You can just create a report for one of them, copy it, change the species, upload different photos, and you have the additional record. One of the other tools that we built was the ability to submit or create multiple observation reports using a templated spreadsheet. So the template is here, and you just open it up, you fill it in, it's pre-formatted, it has all of the fields. You just say that you're bulk uploading, pull in the spreadsheet that you filled in. The system will actually do a cursory evaluation of it to make sure there aren't errors, that you haven't spelled towns wrong, or that you're missing lat longs. It will tell you where there are errors if there are any. If there aren't, you can simply upload it into the system, and it will create all of those records. So if at the end of your field season you've certified 20 vernal pools, you can put them all in a spreadsheet, upload them, and you've created your 20 reports. You still have to submit them individually, but you don't have to create them all one at a time. So that's a very quick, very quick overview of the system itself from the user's perspective, from the front end, if you're going to submit information to us. As part of the system, we also wanted to make it more efficient for our staff to process the records coming in. So we had an internal tool built on the system. So we all use GIS, and we all have our favorite project. And we have this tiny little, I don't know if you can see it, there's an arrow pointing up, the tiny, tiny little turtle icon. We had an extension built into GIS that we have built into our computers. We click on that, log in, and we're able to pull in, any of the points, lines, or polygons that have been submitted up to that point. They all show up in the table on the right. The users, the biologists, this is where they review the submittals for acceptance into our data system. They all have a standard data acceptance criteria that they go through, and they make sure that all the data coming in meet our data standards. So each biologist is able to query out the ones they're looking for. The vernal pool biologist can query out just the vernal pools. The plant biologist can pull out just the plants, et cetera. So they can then open up each of those records. All of the tabs that are filled in on the front end come through on this side. All of the mapping comes through. A snapshot of the map that was submitted, thumbnails of the attachments. which can then be opened in another window. So everything is right there for the biologists to review. They then fill in, again, all within the same system. They go through their checklist for data acceptance. They're able to accept, reject, put on hold, ask for additional information. So they actually process the record within the same system. It then moves to data staff. They're able to simply copy and paste the data into our existing database so that we don't have this retyping of the same information, and it makes the process go very smoothly. Again, on the other side, we wanted to be able to use the system to give a more real-time update to our publicly available data files. So rather than having the certified vernal pool layer be updated every year, through this system, it's automatically updated at the end of every day. So conservation agencies, regulators, towns, conservation commissions, at the beginning of every day, they know that they have the latest information on certified vernal pools. It also updates our town lists, and it used to just be a table spreadsheet. With this system, we built it so that it goes into Google Docs, and you can query on your town and get your list of state-listed species at the town level. You can also query by species and get a range map based on all the data that we have at the town level. And finally, as I mentioned, we had an Android application built as part of the system, so you can capture the basic information while you're in the field. You use the GPS that's in your phone, you use the camera that's in your phone, you capture the basic information of where you are, what species you're observing, take your photographs, and then you can complete the rest of the form once you're back at your desk. All of the information on the system is available on our website. We keep it all on our front page and on our main page, so you link from our front page to our vernal pool page, and everything is there. There's tutorials, there's links to Adobe Flash, how to set up an account, frequently asked questions, and the place to upload your mobile app. So that's, again, a very quick overview. We've now had the system online for a little over 2 years, and so we've been looking at the statistics on usage. In the first year that it was live, we had 287 users sign up. At the end of 2 years, we had another 150 users sign up. And one of the things that so we're really happy with that, the use in just 2 years for the system. We had a lot of people who said, no one's going to use the online system, people really like paper, but I think that that's not true in this day and age. We also had a bit of a theory that we might actually increase the number of submittals that we would get. And so we looked at the 2 years prior to VPRS going live to compare to the 2 years that we've had since. And on average, we got a little under 900 records a year. And in the 2 years since, we've averaged over 1,350. So we have a significant jump in the numbers of records that we're getting in. So at this point, over 60% of our records come through the VPRS system. We think there's still, well, we know that there's still a chunk of users out there who don't use VPRS because the way they collect data is based on old paper forms. So we're actually working with a couple of specific groups that work with specific taxonomic groups with specific taxonomy to bring their paper forms into some sort of system so that they can easily bring it into our electronic system instead of submitting the paper forms. So of course, whenever you build anything, even before it's finished, you have thought of all the things that you wish you had done differently or would like to add to it. The couple of things that we already have on our radar, the first thing that's probably the simplest is better formatting for the print report. The output is in HTML. It's not very fancy. We'd like to make that much more user-friendly. We'd like to have the ability to upload GIS files directly. Some people capture tracks using GPS, or they have radio telemetry data that they've pulled into shape files. We'd like to give them the ability to directly upload them. We have a workaround right now that we've been using. We'd like to be able to go directly through the system. One of the first questions that people always ask is there an app for the iPhone? We do not have that at this point, and that is definitely on our list of things, but it may take a little bit more with our IT system. And finally, something that's probably way down the line is we'd like to see some multi-user capability. If you have an organization all working on the same project with multiple observers, they can't see each other's observations. It's a single user system, and that's for security and going through the firewall and having the electronic signature. But for certain user groups, that is a little bit of a difficulty. So that's something we'd like to see, but it may involve sort of rebuilding parts of the system. And that's the end of my what I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have one question for Sarah from Jackie LeClaire. Has the tool identified areas of habitat for rare species that were previously unknown? How many more vernal pools are now certified as a result?
Oh, that's a great question. So the first one, you know, we get records prior to VPRS and Sense that are updates to existing to populations we know about, but just additional information and some new areas. I don't know that we've necessarily gotten percentage-wise more new areas. I think it's probably the same split, that we're getting as many updates to existing, to known populations as new areas. So we're definitely getting new areas. It's probably not more because we have VPRS. In terms of how many new vernal pools, I'd have to pull the data out. It got a little bit skewed because just in those 2 years, our vernal pool biologists made a huge effort to try to certify a lot of vernal pools. So that was sort of independent of VPRS. So I don't want to pad the numbers, but we definitely had a big push, but I think that was because of our staff. So again, we saw a bit of an increase in the vernal pool certifications, but I don't know if it's, I want to be honest and not say that it's because it's easier on the system. I think we do probably get more vernal pool certifications through this than necessarily plant or animal observations, because I think there's a lot more of the general public doing that sort of thing, if that makes sense.
We have another question. Are you coordinating with the NEWFS PCV program for plant observations?
Yes, actually I was just on the phone with Noose yesterday and actually saw Bill Brumbeck this morning. I've actually gone and given talks in the last couple of years to the training, at the trainings for the PCVs, the use of VPRS. So that's one of the groups that we're working closely with to try to get a lot more compliance and a lot more use of VPRS.
Do the forms include fields for landowner information?
They do. They're not required fields, but there's one of the tabs is landowner information or additional site information. So that if you have landowner information, you can include it in there. There's also, you know, site description or management recommendations, I think, on that tab as well.
Is acceptance ever dependent on vouchers?
It depends on the species. We do require a certain amount of documentation. So if in that checklist that I showed that folks have to go through for acceptance, it includes documentation. Was there the necessary documentation provided? That could be photographs. It could be a voucher. It sort of depends on what's necessary to properly identify the species, or, you know, if we know the observer and that they're the expert in the world on that taxonomic group, we might not require something like that. But it really depends on the species.
Great. Any other questions for Sarah? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody, and we're going to move to the discussion part of our webinar. Where we can discuss more generally web-based tools and how they can improve wetlands work. If anybody has any more general questions or has thought of some other questions, we can go from there.
Your line has been unmuted.
Well, this is Sarah. I'll put something out there. And Nancy, I thought it was very interesting that that you have a survey form in IMAP as well. One of the things we're trying to do is capture negative data, and I don't know if it's something we've struggled with a lot. And I think it's something really, really important. I think the negative data is just as important as the positive data, and I don't know if there are other tools out there or other data collection methodologies that are trying to address. It's still a tough thing. When is a zero really a zero?
Yeah, and Sarah, that's come up with our users in terms of temporal scale too.
Yep.
IMAP allows folks to draw polygons or points right one on top of the other, so it can note if a survey, didn't find something 5 years ago, and then the survey this season did find something. But yeah, I think sometimes citizen scientists, at least, once they understand the idea of it, they're excited about it. But it takes a little, just an explanation for them to see why it would be worthwhile to go ahead and take the time to enter those data.
Right. Right.
Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, please keep your line on mute. All right, so just to both the panelists, what were the biggest obstacles, aside from funding considerations, that you encountered in the process of developing your web-based tools? And we can start with Nancy.
Sure. Thanks, Kim. Yeah. Well, to be honest, it was kind of great because I came on and the web-based tool had already been adopted. It was great. My position was created after we adopted the tool, but I know that there was a lot of groundwork that went into evaluating several different web-based tools to see which one would meet most of the needs and that we would be confident that it would be supported into the future. Another challenge is just, dealing with getting users up to speed on the tool. As I said, it's relatively intuitive, but we all know that there are some citizen scientists who just need a little bit of training to adopt the technology and use it. So we are working hard to get training sessions out to different parts of the state and to different potential user groups. So those are some things that come to mind regarding challenges in getting the tool up and running.
And I guess this is Sarah. For us, and we actually looked at IMAP, and we said not right now, but maybe later. We really like it. And one of the things that we really like about it is it was kind of it's already built. And so I think one of the things that we struggled with was creating something from scratch. I mean, we had the form, so we knew what questions we needed, and we really knew what we wanted. But we were creating a whole new workflow, both externally and internally. And we needed to get it right. We needed to get the ease of use right with a limited budget and time. We also had sort of a unique issue where we had to work through our IT system that had just been consolidated, so they'd never done this before. So we were sort of, it was a big learning curve just working together with the state's IT system and whose role, the different roles and how things were going to get done and responsibilities and timelines and things like that.
It changed since what we talked about this back in September.
Sarah, I'm curious, this is Nancy speaking, I'm curious to know whether your IT folks, now that they've developed the tool, have they dedicated resources to supporting it over time?
Well, so that was one of the difficult pieces. So we actually put it out to contract. So we had contractors build the tool working with our IT, or with the state's IT system, and then, and I think that was sort of the difficulty. It then became the responsibility of the state's IT system, but they didn't build it. And so we've had some difficulty in, okay, you know, folks who weren't really involved at all in the development, who are now responsible for maintaining it, and having to sort of teach them what it is and what it's supposed to do and what it's not supposed to do, and those sorts of things. There are some, you know, a couple of great individuals who really make an effort, but the whole structure made it more of a challenge than I think it had to be.
This is Molly up in Maine. I'm just wondering, like, do you guys own the script and everything, or is it something, I mean, how transferable would this be to other states?
We would love to be able to share it, and I talked to IT. They have standard language about proprietary use and all of those things, and but I think if we want to share it, we can. I don't know a lot about the platform and the building of it, because I'm not a coder or a programmer, but I would hope that it certainly would be. Some of the parts that were built by the state are like the user profile and the security system. So that would be something that we'd have to, I don't know how applicable it would be to share that, or if another, you know, your state has its own interface, because it has to go through our firewall and things like that. But we're really happy to share it with anybody and or share our experience or anything with folks. I'm not enough of a computer person to know how hard that would be.
And this is Molly with another question. Up in Maine, we have a lot of sensitivity around private property rights, and so is there any issues with that in terms of bringing information in? Do you let landowners know that something's been mapped on their land as the information's brought in, or anything done there?
That's been a touchy issue over the years. We have maintained, we actually have regulatory authority over rare species habitats in this state. So if we have credible information about rare species, it doesn't matter who owns it, we can map it as an area that requires regulation if there's a project. So that is something that actually we recently won our state Supreme Court case just last year where someone challenged that, the ability to regulate without the landowner's permission and things like that. But what we maintained was you don't get the choice of opting out of regulation. It's our mandate to protect the rare species. But it's still very touchy, and we've maintained that our requirement is to protect the rare species. That is our first mandate.
I'm not going to suggest that.
What was that?
Just need to have that legal access. Not concerned about that then. Our boulevard.
Is there a question on the line?
Oh, it's not even a city.
I think you can keep going, Sarah.
Okay. So we don't require, we don't necessarily notify a landowner if an observation has come to us. We absolutely do not advocate trespass at all.
The other thing I noticed, so in terms of what's
so we don't advocate trespass. But that's in terms of state law, that's an issue between the landowner and the trespasser.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Yep.
Hi, this is Chris Faulkner from US EPA. I work on the National Wetlands Condition Assessment. And I was impressed with both of these presentations. We wanted to move to electronic format when we were doing our work, but for various reasons we stuck with our paper copy. Maybe in 2016 we can follow your example and get electronic data sheets. I did have a question, though, about how do you ensure that all of your people are doing it right? You know, do you have like ongoing training courses? Are those like, you know, commercially available, or is it something you have to take time out of your schedule to do?
Sarah, do you want to go first, or shall I tackle that?
I'll go a little bit. I think you touched on it in your talk, and I think one of the things that you'll probably say is we actually do go out and do trainings for staff in how to capture the data that we're looking for and how to use the system properly. And then for us, we then have that checklist on the other end where we go through and we say, you know, do the data meet the standards that we have set?
Right.
So that's basically it on our end.
And with IMAP invasives, there is a QA/QC that I didn't mention explicitly in my talk, but as Sarah said, you know, some folks we know that they are experts and that we can trust their plant identification skills, but we do ask users, all users, to submit photos along with their observations, and we will go in and look at those. And we also do trainings, as Sarah said, both IMAP invasives trainings and also trainings in invasive species ID. So we are working with many of our users in one or other of those ways. You know, we do get some requests for user accounts from folks who we don't know, and I'm in communication with them about how we can support them, and, you know, would be looking at their data and getting back to them with questions if we did have a concern. There is a feature in IMAP that shoots me an alert if a species is detected very far outside the known range of that species. So that gives me a little bit of a heads up. But since our database is also just new last year, you know, we're still building our user groups, and we haven't had any real touchy situations in terms of, oh, gee, you know, I don't know if I trust this point. So far, systems seem to be working.
Great. One sort of follow-on is one of the reasons that we didn't use this electronic format is it really restricts what the people, you know, can they annotate easily, you know, oddities that they've observed on the ground when they're collecting the data?
Sure. One of the questions about IMAP, as we discussed, there's a group of database administrators from each of the participating IMAP states, and one of the things that always comes up is that IMAP has so many comment fields, so users really do have an opportunity to comment using text fields. Some people think that's great, and other folks are like, oh my gosh, we have so many of these text comment fields. So I would say that
I believe both of those things.
Yeah, right. It depends on what you're trying to do with the data later. But yes, at least in IMAP, there's plenty of opportunity. Not currently with the smartphone interface. That it is a simple, streamlined interface to take the point. But once you get back to your desktop, you can annotate to your heart's content.
Great. Thank you.
And with BPRS, that was one of the things we thought about a lot. Fortunately, we'd had the paper forms in use for decades, and we knew that people like to write in the margins. And so one thing I didn't highlight, at the bottom of the whole system is a comment field. You can just go ahead and comment about whatever you want, and you can, upload any sort of attachment that you want in order to make sure that we're getting the information that you want to convey to us.
Yeah. How you access that information in the future is another question. But
yes, yes. Analyzing it later is hard.
I had a question for Nancy. This is Beth, and maybe Sarah too. There's in Massachusetts the wetland change effort going on, mapping effort going on, where they're looking at changes in wetland systems over time using their mapping. And I wondered if there was some potential for looking at vernal pools over time using what you're collecting in your database and also looking at those wetland change maps. I don't know if you're familiar with that project or whether there's any potential for monitoring over time these systems now that you're getting them into the GIS and all of that. I guess the same could be said for like beginning with habitat in Maine and how there's all this mapping going on and you're looking at invasive species and looking at how these systems, these wetland systems, are changing relative to invasive species over time.
Yeah, so Beth, if I understand your question, this is Nancy in Maine. Yeah, we can keep track of things temporarily because the records do come in with a timestamp, and so one could, take those out into the ArcGIS environment and do further analysis. With our database being a year old, we do have some records that go back in time, and we're certainly on a path to get it to bring in some additional data, like some herbarium-based records. So I wouldn't say that our database is there yet to do that analysis, but it is set up so that in the future we could do that, as you said, as more records are added over time.
Thank you.
And this is Sarah. So I'm familiar with that DEP effort. They're basically using aerial photography to see changes over time. One of the difficulties with vernal pools is really figuring out what's a vernal pool from the air. And so we had done the potential vernal pool layer that's available. We had done that about 10 or 15 years ago. And where we used aerial photography, and we said, these kind of look like vernal pools. And we have pretty good success rate, like 80% accuracy. But they do change over time. One of the things that we specifically didn't do when we built VPRS was allow the user to see vernal pools that were already certified. We have the potential vernal pool layer in there because some people specifically target those to try and certify them. But we didn't put the certified vernal pool layer in there because what we've found is if people see that it's already certified, they won't bother to submit the information. And we want to continue to get additional information on these vernal pools in order to be able to say over time, are they still maintaining their functionality as a vernal pool?
Thank you.
Hi, Beth.
Yes.
This is Lisa Rhodes.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi,
I didn't know you
were
on the call.
Hi, everyone. I just want to mention, and Mike McHugh might be on this call from our office. He's our mapping specialist, but we're just rolling out a new wetlands mapping, a statewide wetlands mapping layer that it's got shows all the changes from our original base mapping that was, I think, maybe a 2000 year 2000.
Yeah.
So we're just coming to grips ourselves with what it's showing us and what the changes are and how we're going to deal with them. So it'll be interesting when I don't know if it's public yet, but if not, it probably will be soon.
Another webinar, Lisa.
Yeah, Mike, are you on this call? Okay, he might have stepped out, but anyway, it should be soon. So stay tuned. There were a lot of beaver changes due to beaver activity. That much I know. Changes due to development and various other things. So. Just FYI, related to our wetland change. That's it. Private titles.
I hear all these voices in the background, and I'm not sure if there can be questions or not.
This is to anybody on the line that would like to contribute. Do you see any functionality from the presentations that you could apply to your own programs?
Well, this is Sandy in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a wildlife sightings tool that in fact was the subject of a grant to do some upgrading of it and add some additional abilities to report vernal pools, including the secondary vernal pool indicators that were added to our rules in 2008. So that is actually online and available. I don't have information on that data. It's actually our Fish and Game Department and our UNH Cooperative Extension that's been involved in creating and managing that. So I don't have the information, but we did make major changes to that went into place in 2014.
This is Nancy in Maine. I'll just throw out a comment regarding keeping track of invasive species. One of the reasons that we sought to adopt a web-based tool in Maine was just that without a repository that everyone could access, it was increasingly challenging to pull together information on distribution. And so having a sort of a formally adopted one for the state of Maine allows us to begin pulling in these disparate data sets and making them available to land managers statewide. We are excited about that aspect of our tool.
And this is Sarah. Actually, we're sort of using what we've learned in building VPRS to apply to, we're creating an online data collection tool for shorebird data collection. We have a lot of cooperators that we work with, and everybody sort of pulls together into their paper forms. And then we sort through the paper forms, and we said, why not all put into one system that's online, available to all these users, password protected, that we can then actually export into the bulk upload feature for VPRS. So we're trying to link them all together, but using the same concepts that we were going on with the VPRS, and learning from the mistakes or just what we went through in building VPRS. And this is Sarah again, and I would say, Nancy, when you were I was writing notes when you were talking about the survey area and the management. We've been trying to pull together a habitat management database that can be used by multiple cooperators, but it goes beyond just invasive species control, if it's burning and mowing and things like that. But some of those features in there, I'm actually going to send some of our or maybe, Kim, when the webinar is available, I'll have some of our habitat managers take a look at that and see if we can apply the same sort of concepts or something.
Great. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, that would be great. So does anybody else have anything to add? Because I think we're kind of running to the end. I know we said 4:30. That was a rough estimate to see how much time we would need. I just want to say, if nobody has anything else to add, I want to thank all of you for attending. I'm really excited for this webinar series, and I'm really delighted that you all participated today. Our next webinar, because we're going to go ahead with the second Thursdays of the month, would be scheduled for March 12th. We're working on selecting presenters, and we'll be accepting additional topic submissions. So I will send out an email early next week for that, and I'm also going to send out a brief survey, just time period, things that you liked, things you might like to see added in the next webinar. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can call me or you can email me. It's right there on the screen, or in all of those millions of emails I have sent you over the past few weeks. So again, thank you very much, and with that, I will conclude.
Great. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks
a
lot.
Thank you.
Hey, Kim, this is Chris Faulkner. Can you please add me to your distribution?